And that's the best thing to do. Like, if you wouldn't pick your firm today, if you were out there doing research and your firm was one of the ones you were doing diligence on, if you would not pick your firm today, why are you there? There's no excuse.
Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. Brought to you by Elite Consulting Partners, it's the only podcast offering unfiltered guidance and direct advice for all things concerning financial advisors, RIAs, and the practitioners in the wealth management business. Learn more and subscribe today at eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcast. And now, here's your host, Frank LaRosa.
Hey everybody, welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. I am your host, Frank LaRosa, and once again joined by my co-host, Stacey with an E, Stacey Frank.
Hello, welcome everybody. I didn't expect that. That was different. Brought me off track.
That was what my wife calls hot and direct.
Welcome everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate all the feedback. We appreciate the phone calls. Lots of interest in our podcast. Got a funny story to talk about as it relates to our podcast and actual advisor's client, which we'll talk about as one of our topics today. But today we really want to get into the real cost of doing nothing and how inaction actually can hurt your growth. Because we do talk to a lot of advisors that are sort of complacent at their firms, complacent, but at the same time, not all that happy.
Right. And a lot of times when that happens, an advisor decides to stay, we find ourselves 6 to 12 months from now just having the same conversation again anyway, because those underlying reasons don't ever really go
all
away.
Over it. Yeah, I tell my team, if they've talked to an advisor and the advisor has talked to firms, and then for whatever reason they put everything on hold, it's not a matter of if the advisor is going to move, it's just when. Because in their mind, and in your mind as a financial advisor, you know you're not happy at the firm that you're at. You know it. In your mind, in your gut. And it's only a matter of time before the things that are frustrating you continue to come back and rear their ugly heads. The problem that we have, not the problem, but what we see on the other side is, yes, a year later we have those conversations, but how about when we move an advisor years later and they almost inevitably say, I wish I did this sooner?
Right. Well, I guess what we see on the other side, and we were just talking about this before the podcast, is that when you are approaching clients about making that kind of a change or becoming a business owner, your conversation just inevitably shifts. You're having a different, deeper dive conversation with with your end client, because you're making that change that's going to affect the advisor and then ultimately the client. So the conversation just goes in a totally different direction, and 9 times out of 10, those clients are typically like, yeah, I was wondering when you were going to do something like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, years ago when I moved, when I was at Prudential Securities, and I didn't have a huge book, but I had a book nonetheless, and I moved to Smith Barney, a lot of my clients were like, I didn't really care for the firm that you were at anyway, so I was only working with you because of you, so it didn't really matter to me, right? Or some of them were like, well, I didn't really like the firm that you were at because of whatever they were doing, and I'm really glad you're making this move. But one of the things that we talk about is sort of a cost, right? And a lot of advisors will say to us, well, I'm not ready to make a decision, so I'm just going to stay. And
well, you just made a decision.
So you just made a decision. And, you know, when we were working with one client, and one advisor, there was a 2-man team, and one advisor knew they wanted to leave. Like, they were done at the firm that they were at. It was not even a question. They were miserable for all whatever reasons. It doesn't really matter. The other advisor was not at the same place mentally as the one advisor.
Right.
And this sort of dance between the two advisors, and with us, basically playing psychologist for many, many times, many meetings, continued on for a couple of years. Right. Ultimately, the advisor that decided that they didn't want to be at a wirehouse firm anymore, right? So it was somewhat more about that book ownership versus the firm itself. There were some things with the firm, but it's really about book ownership and building a legacy for themselves, right? So the sad thing is that over time, because he already knew that he was going to go independent, and so we already knew economically how much money he was leaving on the table every single month that he stayed at the firm. So 2 years later, almost 2.5, I think, actually, no, it was like 4 years.
It was like, well, from start to finish, it was 4 years.
Right.
But really,
but
once
he knew,
yeah.
right, it was like 2.5 years. Like, meaning that once he knew, okay, this is what I want to do, right? Now I need to just get my partner on the same page. That period of time cost that advisor like probably 7 figures.
Yeah, I mean, it was like $4,000 a week or something.
It was
something
some
crazy like
number, because these are pretty decent sized producers, and so the cost of his inaction was significant, way more than any deferred comp, way more than dealing with the split numbers that he was going to have to deal with, and potentially losing a couple of clients. Right, like the cost of him doing nothing was substantially more than a couple of the accounts he was going to have to give up if he left, right? And it worked out, and it was amicable and all that. And we played a role in helping that go down, which was fine.
Right, and the funny thing is,
basically wanted me to be the bad guy and tell his partner that they were breaking up. I was like the high school kid that's told the girlfriend or boyfriend,
it's
like your boyfriend's
counseling, it's
breaking up with you.
relationship counseling.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that the one advisor is now doing great things, successful, and running their independent practice, and the other advisor is still where they were
Still
initially,
miserable.
Complaining,
Right.
still unhappy.
Right. And so,
problems didn't go away.
We look at that like what is the cost of inaction? The cost of inaction is not getting your career started, because we work with a lot of advisors that are in their I'll call it mid 40s to late 50s, mid 50s, late 50s, some of them that are just going independent today. But that's okay. It's like another evolution of your career, right? And so the longer you wait to do that, the more money you're leaving on the table, and the longer it's going to take you to realize the dreams that you really want in your business. So yes, we're talking about economics, but how about the emotional side of it, right? The ownership, the joy in owning your own business is, I think, something you can't put a price tag on.
Right. No, it's really hard because so many different emotions set in, fear, path of least resistance, all that stuff. But to your point, like what is the cost? And the hard thing is that as you're thinking about these things, you're kind of living, we call it a double life. Right. You're 100% into the business that at the wirehouse or the bank or whatever firm you're currently at. But because that nagging thought keeps poking at you, it's distracting. Right, so something's telling you to act on it, but that's where complacency sort of. I know we've done.
Well, because you're sort of leaving yourself. You want to you're sort of leaving yourself with options, right? You want to look at you want to feel good about you doing something, like you're going to make a move, and so going through that motion makes you feel like you're moving the ball forward, but you're not really doing it with full intention because you're not sure what you really want to do. The advisors that I've seen that are the most successful are really the ones that have a full intention of what they want. I know I'm going to go independent. I know I want to leave. So let's go through this process. The ones that I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen advisors drag their feet, sort of what you're saying, like they have their feet on both sides, right? And they go down the road, they have conversations, then they stop. Then they come back 6 months later, do the same thing, and they start all over again because they forgot everything, right? Or they're 2 or 3 years into it, and the deals have substantially changed. In this case, for the better for now, right? But some of the players may change. And because you're not in either one, meaning you don't know if you're staying or going.
You're in limbo.
You're in limbo. You're not really putting all of your effort into either channel, right? So I was watching this movie. I was watching The Hunt for Red October last night, which is an awesome movie. And I've seen it like 100 times, but I watched it from the very beginning last night. And Ramius, so he's going to defect. I don't know if you've ever seen Hunt for Red October.
Not recently.
Oh my goodness. Okay, but you've seen it.
Yes.
Okay, that would have been a problem.
Ago, yeah.
Okay, you may not be able to be a guest of mine anymore, or co-host.
I'm fired.
Anyway, so Ramius, who's the Russian submarine commander, is planning on defecting, and he has his crew. And right before he leaves, he sends a letter to their basically their leader, their admiral of the Russian, forces, whatever, and lets them know they're defecting, right? And he does, the crew says, "Why did you do that? Why did you do that?" And he says, "Because I need to make sure that we can't go back. Because if they went back, they'd all be killed." And so that's the whole expression of burn your ships at the shore, right? You either doing it or don't do it, right? And what I tell advisors a lot of times is go through this process, not quickly like rushing, but go through this process with intention and then decide whether you are going to do it or not. And if you're not going to do it, that's okay. Like if you decide it's not for me, I'm just going to stay where I am, that's a great decision, because then you can be fully committed to that decision with all its bells, whistles, and warts.
Right, and you're making the decision to be okay.
Be
okay with some of the challenges that may never go away. So you're deciding, I'm just going to handle these issues and not complain about it anymore. But if you're going to come back in a year or two from now and still go through the same exercise, then you're just sort of, going back to living that double life again.
Right. There is no, let me just be crystal clear about this. There is no perfect firm. There isn't. Okay? It's just like there is no perfect husband or perfect wife, right? Or perfect girlfriend or boyfriend. Nobody is perfect. Whatever firms tell you, they are not perfect. We always say we call balls and strikes, right? But there is not a perfect firm, but there is a right firm for every single advisor. And that firm could be the one that you're at. But you may not know that until you go through this process. And so to Stacey, what your point is saying is understand what's out there. And if you feel like those options aren't good for you and you're just going to stay where you are, then just be okay with the fact that your firm isn't perfect. Maybe your branch manager is not great. Well, that's okay, right? Control what you can control in the environment that you're in. And if you know compliance is going to ask you 75 questions when you submit an annuity contract, then have 78 questions answers ready to go.
Every time.
Right. Just know what the situation is. At least you know. It's like the devil you know, right? Is that the expression? The devil you know is better than when you don't know, right? I'm talking to an advisor, and he's gonna want like royalties for this. And he knows what I'm talking about because he listens to my podcast all the time, which I appreciate. And he's super, super nice guy. But we were having a conversation. He's coming from a W-2 environment, and they've been in a W-2 environment their whole careers. And so he's looking at all the technology and all the stuff in the independent space, which is not necessarily the same, right? And the firm that he's coming from has pretty good technology. And so I just tried to explain to him that you have to understand that the world that you're going in, there's going to be pluses and minuses. Some of the minuses are the technology may not be what he's used to, right? But balance that with the higher payouts, book ownership, valuation, ability to do the things that you want to do. All of those things will outweigh the things about technology that he may or may not even be using.
Right. I think the biggest thing is looking at those challenges that you're currently experiencing. Not necessarily, I hate using the term pain points, like bleh. But not necessarily running away from those pain points and those challenges. Friction. Because there's, again, to your point, there's no perfect scenario, but running towards a firm or towards a vision that you have that's a better opportunity long-term for the growth of your business and the way you service your clients, period, the end. And if where you sit today is not helping you achieve those goals, maybe you just simply outgrew that firm. You outgrew it because you have a new vision. And that's what we're here to help define.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I was talking to one of our business development associates earlier, and we were talking about the right type of conversation to have with a financial advisor. There's a negative conversation and there's a positive conversation. The negative conversation is, hey, tell me what you hate about your firm, right? Well, let me tell you why your firm isn't great, blah, blah, all these problems, right? And I was telling them that's not really the conversation that you want to have. What you want to have is, tell me about what you're trying to get accomplished in your life and with your practice. And in a perfect world, what would the firm that you work for look like? those are the positive things.
Yeah, what's the vision that you have? I love asking this question. What's the vision you have for your business? And sometimes we get the, I don't know.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
What do you want to be when you grow up? Same thing. But that's what we're here for, is to help you define that. Because going through this process away from the firm you sit at today, I just had this to an advisor yesterday, all women's team that I'm working with. That vision, that definition evolves as we go through this.
Right.
It always does.
Right. The other thing that, so we talk about stagnation and comfort versus success. What I found over many, many, many years is I look at advisors that have stayed at their firms for a long time. And then I look at advisors that have moved firms, and even the ones that have moved multiple times, right? And sometimes we call those, they're rent an advisor, professional movers, whatever you want to call it. But the advisors that, and maybe more so advisors that move into the 1099 space, those advisors that move tend to have higher growth rates than advisors that just stay where they are, because they stay in that environment where they think, it's sort of like the house analogy, right? Like you're in your house and you may not realize like how bad the furniture really is, and
until you step outside and can look in.
Right, you look in, or you go to somebody else's house that maybe they're the person that moves homes every 5 or 6 years, and or they constantly get new furniture. But you go to their house and it looks awesome, and then you go back to your house, you're like, oh my god, like how old is this furniture, right? It's the same thing with financial advisors. When you make a move, there's a level of energy that you get, your team gets. Rejuvenation, which leads to more growth. And I think advisors don't truly understand that, which is why most advisors that we move, especially more so from the W-2 space into 1099, almost always say, I wish I did this sooner. So if you think that staying at your firm, because you're, what I get a lot of times, well, I have a lot going on right now, so I'm going to stay because I don't want to upset what's happening, right? Meaning they have new clients.
The path of
coming
least
on board.
resistance. It's
I always
the
think
easy
that's
path.
an excuse, right? Because if you're a good advisor, you'll always have stuff going on, meaning that you'll always have new clients coming on board, new referrals coming in, right? So just be honest. Like, I don't want to do it.
There's never a perfect time.
There's never a perfect time.
I think there's, it's
like
St. Patty's Day, it's Valentine's Day.
Yeah, right. It's a full moon on a Wednesday.
Yeah. It's the summer.
Right. And so I think that's interesting. The other thing, and this is where I'm leading up to the story that I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, I think that the attitude of advisors has changed to today more than ever before. I think the attitude of clients of the advisors has changed more than ever before. And what I mean by that is clients don't really care what firm you're at. They really don't. Especially if you've had a client with you for 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 years, right? They don't care. If anything, they have lost a lot of respect for the firms that you're at. What I mean by respect was back in the day, for those of you that haven't been in this business for more than 15 or 20 years, and I'll use Merrill Lynch as an example. And I'm not shitting on Merrill Lynch right now, but it's just the best example, right? Clients that were at Merrill Lynch were at Merrill Lynch first and foremost because it was Merrill Lynch, secondarily the financial advisor. And so years and years ago, like Merrill Lynch advisors just didn't leave because the clients literally didn't want to leave Merrill Lynch. They didn't care what advisor they were assigned to. They wanted a Merrill Lynch statement.
They bought the brand.
Right. They bought the brand. 2008 and 2009 leveled the playing field. Totally diminished that across every single firm. So where I'm going with this is I have and this sort of dawned on me how important this really is and how engaged or interested clients are about when you make a move. And so I'm talking to a client yesterday, one of our clients, and he's going through this process. They're going through this process. They're a great team. And his 80-year-old client comes in, right? And I'm not going to use the name of the firms that they're at or whatever. It's not relevant. But the client was doing some research because this particular team, they're already independent, so they were making some decisions on what they were doing. And somehow the client, they must have had a previous conversation with the client about what was going on. Anyway, so the client, being 80 years old and probably having nothing to do, and probably loves the business, right? I know some clients that are like that. Comes back to him with his own research on the different firms that are available for this advisor to move to. And he circles one of the firms which the client likes, which is one of the ones that we're talking to. And I'm not going to name the firms. But it was interesting that the client did the research. But then the other thing that the client said was, you should talk to this. I listen to all these podcasts, and you should talk to this guy, Frank LaRosa, because I'm like, wait a minute, your client is telling you this about my podcast. And the reason I say that, one, because it's pretty cool. And maybe we're going to try to have that client on as a podcast guest.
Yeah.
But two, it just showed me how interested the advisor was in how interested the client was with the advisor moving. And the client didn't really care that the advisor was moving. He just thought it was an interesting conversation, and he was moving with him no matter what, right? And so I think that advisors, that was sort of a ramble.
But it's relevant to the connection between the client and the advisor. I think that's the point.
It's the client and the advisor. And just don't get caught up in, I'm going to stay because I'm not sure, how I feel about my clients. Now, you've said this in the past, and you've used this example in the past, where sometimes stagnation can be a real problem for you, where you had a client that basically hadn't talked to the third of their clients for years.
Yeah, it was exposure. And sometimes that fear creeps in, like, oh my gosh, maybe my clients won't come with me. And it's an admittance of, I haven't really done a great job of cultivating those relationships. But in your example, it sounds like that advisor really has, for the client to come to him and say, hey, I want to be part of your decision to make this change.
Right.
I mean, that's depth. In our space, that's real depth in that relationship.
Right, exactly. And so, just be mindful about that, right? And staying where you are may seem like a good idea. If you're happy and they provide all the stuff and they're giving you all the resources and all that, then by all means stay, right? What we always say is, we empower financial advisors to make the right move, not just the next move. And sometimes that means staying right where you are and then just growing from there. And that's perfectly okay.
As long as you don't make it as it's just the path of least resistance.
It's just the easiest thing, because it's
the easy button. Right?
You will regret that. We're telling you, you will regret it. There are, the making a move is easier than ever before. Everything is DocuSign for the most part. Accounts are transferred in days. If you have lending, there's always ways to facilitate that stuff. Products and services are almost all the same at this point. And client retention during the move is as high as it's ever been, maybe aside from maybe 2020, where it was like 98%.
Yeah, right? And I always ask, one of the first questions I ask any advisors that I work with is, tell me about the strength of the relationship you have with your clients. And the answers are profound. I mean, the loyalty of clients, maybe more so today than back then, is really compelling. So for those reasons, that lessens the risk right there.
Right. So listen, you should, if you're thinking about this and you listen to this podcast, you should be thinking about a couple things. One, just like you do an annual review with your clients, you should do an annual review of the broker-dealer or the RIA firm that you're at, and understand whether or not they're the right firm for you in the future. Obviously, bring in someone like us and we can help you with that, right? We sort of call balls and strikes. We are... I'll say we are as agnostic as we possibly can be, because we work with over 150 different firms. We can give you the education that you need on whether or not you're at the right firm, including running pretty in-depth pro formas to check out the economics versus staying versus going, or
right,
W-2 versus 1099.
The
numbers are the numbers, right? So we have a very, very in-depth modeling that we can show you that essentially has taken over the years all the different variations of different firms, and we sort of levelize the playing field by putting it into one robust system that sort of levelizes the playing field, because this firm charges one way, but this firm charges another way. we've done it. We've designed this program that levelized everything. So we'd be happy to do that.
I think one question, and we both sort of asked the same type of question to an advisor that's deciding, should I stay, should I go? And the question is, if you were to choose on a bunch of options, if you had 3 options of 3 new firms, would your current firm be one of them? Would you re-choose, is that a word? Would you reselect the firm that you're currently at if you had to make that decision again? So if you're thinking path of least resistance, just to kind of tie it all back, complacency,
That's
should
a
I
great
stay,
question.
should I go? Okay, would you, if you were to re-interview your firm today compared to 10, 15, 20 years ago where you went there, would you still select them?
Yeah.
And if the answer is, I don't know, here we are again. You just came to your own self-realization of what you should consider doing.
Yeah, if your answer is no way,
then
you need to leave.
Then it's just path of least resistance.
Then it's just path of least resistance, and it's costing you way more than you realize.
Right.
And I think that's the bottom line. Our goal here is to help advisors navigate the space, tell you the things that no one else might be telling you, right? Because your branch manager, the guys in your office, the gals in your office, they're not going to be talking about these things because they don't have any of the experience. We have experience across hundreds and hundreds. We moved almost 200 unique advisor transactions last year. 200 across the country. There isn't really a practice that we haven't seen.
We've seen so many
scenarios. And the dynamics behind all those practices and the different advisors and, just the G2s and G3s and who's got this and who's got that. We see it all. And so we're just trying to tell you, and that's the best thing to do. If you wouldn't pick your firm today, if you were out there doing research and your firm was one of the ones you were doing diligence on, if you would not pick your firm today, why are you there? There's no excuse. It's easy to make a move. All of these firms have transition teams. There are transition companies that the firms hire to bring people in to help you with the account information. We work with advisors. We'll send our team, my technology guys, to go and help you set the office up. There are abundance of resources to help you achieve your goal. And you might have to do a little bit of work, but you're going to get paid for it. The deals have never been higher than they've ever been today. I've never seen it like this before. Candidly, I don't see it stopping anytime soon. So there is an opportunity for you to really leverage your life's work without you having to sell the business. Right.
You don't have to disrupt the structure. You don't have to disrupt what you love doing about your business. Just ask yourself, what is your firm doing to help you service your clients and continue to grow if you're someone that's growth oriented.
If you're in the retail space, for the 50-60% that they're taking off of your payout. Right? So anyway, I think we beat that horse pretty dead.
We're pretty passionate about it, so we
are, because we see we are. It's painful to watch sometimes when we know that there's a right solution for the advisor. Yes, it's in our interest because we're going to get paid, but ultimately we know what's going to happen. We know a year from now or 2 years from now,
it's coming
we're
back.
Going to have the same conversation because the problems that you're having are not going to get solved overnight, right? And so, with that said, if you want to have a conversation and just talk through your emotions, right?
Go through the exercise.
Understand what's out there. We can have a conversation with you actually without really even going through the entire exercise, right? Because we know all of the stuff that we know about all the different firms, we can have a conversation with you and just give you a sort of the lay of the land, right? From spectrum to spectrum on what payouts look like, what technology looks like, and just educate you to see whether or not that's even of interest to you. And if it is, great. If it's not, that's okay too. It's only a matter of time before you decide that you want to evolve into something different, and we'll be here to help you.
Right. And maybe we convince you to stay at the firm that you're at as long as it's not just for the path of least resistance.
Right.
Dun-dun-dun.
So there you go. So with that said, if you feel like you want to have a conversation, obviously Stacey's got a master's degree in psychology, so she's probably better at that than I am.
Master profiler, right.
There you go, master profiler. What's your number?
856-816-6322 or Stacey@eliteconsultingpartners.com. Don't forget the E. Or Frank at
eliteconsultingpartners.com or 856-316-4651. And you can also DM me either LinkedIn or on my Instagram account, which is franklarosa.elite. You should check it out because it's awesome. You should also check out our YouTube channel, because if you're just listening to this on iTunes, we have an awesome YouTube channel. You can see what our podcast is.
See it all in action.
You can see it all in action, right. So anyway, with that said, have a great week. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your loyalty of all of our listeners. This continues to be one of the top podcasts in our space, and I really appreciate everything that you all do, forwarding this on to people that are having questions, and just the feedback that we get is amazing. Hearing that an actual client was listening to this was even sort of made my week. So anyway, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.
See you soon.
Thanks for listening to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. If you're looking for more advice or solutions on any topics in the financial services industry, or you just want to subscribe to our podcast, head on over to eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcasts.